Hello, it's Scott Manley here with part 15 of Kerbal. Spaceships are serious business, and we are in serious business because Arkady Zimmerman is stuck in orbit in his spacecraft Orbital 1. So he switches to his secondary spacecraft, called the EVA suit, and we're going to try and deorbit this just a little. All we need to do is use the suit's built-in propulsion system to essentially push the spacecraft down a little. Now, of course, we can do this in Kerbal Space Program, but in reality, this probably wouldn't happen. So this really isn't serious business, is it? On the other hand, if you ask Arkady, I'm pretty sure he'd say, forget about the serious business, I'd like to get home. So he is doing his best. We're using the cold gas thrusters on this suit. Now, obviously in the 1950s, or the 1960s, or the 1970s even, nobody had used these little rocket packs in this form. They did actually test rockets, personal rocket engines on the Gemini missions, I believe. But it wasn't until the shuttle era that we had these kind of, manned maneuvering units. And the problem with this is that there's no stability on this. There's no hardware to keep it stable, so it just ends up rotating. Ow, ow! I was trying to hit it in such a way to reduce the rotation, but I think I'm failing terribly. Oh dear, it could be even worse. Arkady, you could be stuck in space, unable to get back into your capsule. I'm down to less than 80% of my fuel on this. Now I think about it, I'm not sure if Realism Overhaul has an unlimited supply of EVA propellant. The real MMUs on the space shuttle, the only flew in a few missions, they use nitrogen, cold nitrogen, compressed nitrogen. The reason being, of course, that you don't want to use those conventional rocket fuels because they are big fires. And fires in space are not good for other astronauts. Excellent. Okay, we got it back. Come on, back on board. I think that's potentially a really bad plan. I have a second plan, and we actually used this for deorbiting a previous stage. So, we have these the RCS system. The RCS thrusters, RCS system is obviously redundant. And if the thrusters are offset from the center of mass, and they're not, acting in antagonistic pairs, or they're not acting in pairs simultaneously, I should be able to do this. I should be able to rotate in one direction, right, towards the retrovector, and then when I get to the other side, I turn it the other way, and the net effect. Was there a net effect? The net effect should be that we reduce our periaps. Let's see how this is doing. Periaps is 157, and it does seem to be getting smaller when I'm doing that, so that is a good sign. That is a very good sign. 156. Okay, Arkady, you may have in fact found a way to bring your spacecraft home using nothing more than rotational thrusters. This is a good design. Or it is a good backup plan. It's certainly a lot safer than flying around outside in space and trying to push this thing home. This, unfortunately, would take a very long time. You can look at the timer. It took about 10 minutes, I think, of this random thrusting back and forth. The high test peroxide that is used for the rotational thrusters, for the reaction control system, we had more than enough, although I did initially start out with only 40 units of HTP, as opposed to a potential 160 or 150 or whatever. I'd only really expected to use this for rotating in space, never thought that my life would depend on it, although I guess attitude control is kind of a, high importance thing when you're floating around in space. So yes, now Arkady is on his way home with his precious records and everything intact. He obviously has the record for the highest Kerbal ever. He didn't want to be the one to get the record for the first Kerbal to die in space, right? Obviously, we've had Kerbals that have died, but they have died because they hit the ground. Although they did hit the ground in the pursuit of space technology, technically that still qualifies as dying on the ground, right? I mean, I'm sure that's not much consolation for the dead, but the PR people are probably happier because they say, well, technically most of the astronauts haven't actually died in space. They've died on the ground, right? Yeah, no, never mind. I mean, I guess that's the equivalent of an airline saying that flying is actually incredibly safe because it's falling and crashing, which kills you generally. I mean, let's be clear, flying is statistically vastly safer than driving. Interestingly enough, I used to fly with the kids and I discovered apparently the NTSB doesn't want to recommend that parents have car seats for babies on planes for the simple reason that they don't want to make it any harder for parents to take planes, because the alternative is that they drive that long distance and then there's more chance of them getting in a car crash and dying. And maybe that story is apocryphal, but it is what I have heard. Anyway, as we see, Arkady is on his way, definitely on his way home. He's safely home. And, yeah, obviously we'll have a chance to have kids and eventually try to deal with the dilemma of how to deal with a take your kids to work day when you are flying in space. Yeah, that's actually an interesting question as to when the first kids will be able to fly into space. I think the nearest we've had is German Titov from Vostok 2, and he was 25. Anyway, back safe, we can check our mission completions. We get more science. Yes, brilliant. Arkady has no experience. We have some completed goals. Where does it close there? Contract complete. Human orbital, yes, except he's a Kerbal, obviously. We should really start calling them Kerbals. It's not fair. Orbiter 2 was complete, and we succeeded in things, but we still have the first spacewalk contract, and we definitely did some spacewalking. We did some revolutionary spacewalking. Design, build, and launch into orbit, blah, 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 blah. You'll need to complete at least a single orbit with a perigee before you try... Maybe... Oh, man, is that the problem? I thought... Well, our perigee was definitely high enough. This is a problem. Glitched mission time. I shall have to go back and make sure that I actually collect... Oh, you know what? I didn't collect EVA when I was trying to push him home. He was more concerned with staying alive. So that... I'll have to make sure I stay in orbit long enough this time before performing the EVA. Crap. Anyway, while arguing with the lawyers, the Unmanned program has developed a bigger and more powerful, entirely super cheap basically a super cheap sounding rocket that we can launch payloads up to over 3,000 kilometers, and that's good because we actually have some sounding rocket contracts that I accepted that require an unmanned payload to that altitude. These are using the Castor boosters and other bits of space tech, including the Baby Sergeant right on the top. It is a 4-stage solid rocket booster system. Finally, of getting up to, 3,000, 4,000 kilometers, you pretty much have to get close to orbital velocity, or a long way towards orbital speed to actually do that. Look at this, at burnout, we're going at over 6 kilometers per second, another kilometer and a half, another 1,500 meters per second, and we would be at orbital speed. But actually doing that would require a whole bunch of extra control systems and everything. I think this whole spacecraft costs me something like 700 funds, whatever funds work as. So that's, less than a 100th of the cost of some of these larger rockets that I'm building. Of course, it is but one short-lived trip with a glorious return to French Guinea, I guess, because that's where... French Guiana, sorry. French Guiana, that's where Kourou is. Thanks for everyone that corrected me on that. I sorely hope that we get 64-bit Kerbal Space Program working reliably, because I really need to get those high-quality texture packs. I have 32 gigs of memory in this computer, and I'm still only using 4 of them for Kerbal. And with that contractual obligation out the way, it's over to Orbiter 3. Orbiter 3 is going to try and get that little EVA requirement. That's spacewalk. It's very interesting that the FAI is not awarding anyone the first spacewalk until they have flown in space for long enough to actually show that they're in orbit. I guess that's to stop people doing an EVA. Well, yes, nice. I guess that's to stop people doing an EVA while they're on a suborbital trajectory or something. I don't know. Anyway, the only real difference in this design is we upgraded the first stage a little. We've stretched both stages to increase the amount of fuel in them. We added 6 solid rocket boosters on that first stage to help get us into the air faster. And By the way, yeah, this is my third version of the Kerbal Realism Overhaul install. It is finally on CCAN, and finally everything is working. If you install Science Alert, by the way, Science Alert does cause all sorts of trouble. For a while it was stopping me being able to transmit science home, and I was stuck on that one. But there is a patch, so if you need Science Alert, make sure you get the patch. Finally, we are onto our S-5400, yes, the first ever closed-cycle Kerbal engine, developed by the Russians for upper stage to the R7, or finally Soyuz and all derivative launchers and everything. And yeah, so I kind of messed up this launch a little. I underestimated how much vertical speed I needed, and while after I reached 4.4 kilometers per second, I started falling back down. Yeah. And I began to worry that this might end up being a rather shorter trip than I had imagined. Tatiana, of course, doesn't really care. She's quite happy despite the fact that she's falling towards re-entry with the rocket still firing, hoping that perhaps the thing will actually pick up speed. Kept the rocket attitude between 20 to 25 degrees, so wasn't sufficient to completely offset gravity, but as we pick up speed, of course, the velocity around the Earth will reduce the amount of force required vertically, and our vertical speed should start to slow down. Eventually. Come on, we're 165, we're getting pretty close to that atmosphere. Yes! Now our vertical speed is now starting to decrease. Question is, will it decrease quickly enough, or will we dip back into the atmosphere? Who knows? Much fun is to be had here. Tatiana is actually getting kind of antsy, I think. She probably wants to get into space. Yeah, really? Like, bringing that nose up to 30 degrees, we're inside the atmosphere! Falling down at 250 meters per second. Oh, at least things are starting to turn around quickly. We're down to 120 kilometers. We're barely inside the atmosphere. 100 meters per second. Vertical. And rapidly decreasing. I think we will get up to orbital speed. The question is... Oh, look. Science Alert has an alert for me. What is it? Oh, there. EV. Oh, what happens? Oh, no, 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 climb back on there. No, EVA, wait, right, EVA, no, right click, no, no, come on, EVA, yes, get back on. You're not supposed to do the spacewalk until you're actually in space, and you're certainly not supposed to do it while a rocket is firing. Oh dear, like my idle clicking almost doomed Tatiana. That, I don't think we could have put a rescue mission together in time, given Kerbal construction time limitations. Okay, apoapsis is 248, which is good, and we have 4 ignitions left. So now we just need to fly around to the other side of the planet and circularize this so that our periapsis is, well, slightly higher than it currently is. Time acceleration. Time acceleration is, of course, great. I have persistent rotation here, so persistent rotation will make sure that my spacecraft continues to spin, even as I enter the regime of on-rails time acceleration. Look at that. Oh, science! I record the crew's assessment of the situation. Brilliant. Okay, and we're getting ready, so then point the spacecraft in the correct direction. Make sure our propellants are stable, and fire thrusters, and stop thrusters! Great, we're in orbit. I think we're in the correct altitude range. That was quite a noise there as it shut down. 3,000... Okay, so we are in the correct altitude range. We have to stay in this orbit 4 days for one contract, but we need to stay in orbit for 90 minutes before we actually perform a spacewalk, because we really want that spacewalk contract. 90 minutes should bring us back roughly to where we are. Actually, does it have... No, doesn't... Our orbital period is 1 hour 29 minutes. Pretty good. I've switched away from using Kerbal Engineer since Realism Overhaul includes Mechanical Jeb by default, so I might as well use the Windows on this. I'm probably not using any of the mechanical jib controls just yet, but maybe I'll need that for, landing spacecraft on moons and stuff since I'll have lag. Okay, we're ready for this historic EVA. One small step for Kerbal, one giant sandwich waiting for them when they get back home. This is ground control to top spaceman. Step out the door. Insufficient avionics, locking control, whatever. EVA report. Yes, I've recorded it. I noticed toggle EVA suit. I'm wondering if I should hit that button. Probably not. EVA report while in near Earth space. All collected. Excellent. And now we only have another 4 days, 4 days and 27 minutes to remain in orbit to complete the other contract. We will be very happy when we can get back home or return home and receive the adulation that is surely deserved of such a space hero. Tatiana spending 4 days, or rather almost 50 orbits of the Earth. Wow, actually we should probably send the stored data home. EVA report, send it home. Transmit data, 0%, but it doesn't matter. Whoa, no comms device. Well, it doesn't matter, I cannot transmit data anyway. I just thought that would be a useful thing to transmit home. But regardless, we get ourselves set up for our final... we've stayed in orbit at the correct set of altitudes. Now, we want to go a little higher. We have this main engine here. And we have no fuel left or something. Yes, propellant is very stable, but the status is flamed out because all the liquid oxygen evaporated. I think I need a calculator in real fuels that will calculate how long these liquid, oxygen and stuff will last, so I can adjust my ratios. Anyway, yeah, we decided to initially go up, and then I decided, actually, she wasn't going to break any records because of this, so instead, we'll turn around and go back to Earth. So, it was a very short burn, lifted the apoaps up to almost 700 kilometers before she figured out that she would not be able to compete with Arkady's current record and needed to go back and just be accepting of finally having the lawyers sign on the dotted line and certify her spacewalk as being the first true spacewalk, despite all the previous spacewalks that have been performed in the pursuit of this spacewalking contract. It's kind of like one of those records that would have an asterisk next to it, right? But space records are full of such asterisks. Vostok 1. They kept the fact that Yuri Gagarin did not land inside the capsule a secret because the Russians or the Soviets were afraid that the FAI or the Federation or whatever, the people that do that, they thought they would not ratify his status as the first person to orbit the Earth because he hadn't actually landed inside the capsule. For reference, the first pilots to actually orbit the Earth and launch and land in their capsule would of course be John Glenn in the Mercury program. Of course, I then have to point out that the Soviets beat them with Belka and Strelka, who I'm sure were amazingly cute and awesome, but they were actually dogs, therefore don't qualify as men. But actually, for reference here, Tatiana is a Kerbal, so doesn't actually qualify for that. One of the things I was trying to do during this descent was use the little rocket engine, to burn off some extra fuel, slow myself down faster. But these things are kind of fragile and only lasted so long against the forces of re-entry. John Glenn actually had a similar issue when during his flight the sensors indicated that the heat shield may actually be detached. He was a little concerned, so they left the descent rockets attached to the rocket during re-entry. But yeah, Tatiana returns home, no doubt ready to sign on the dotted line and be finally the first official for real EVA in space, according to the FAI. Science, science, science. Pods and stuff recovered, ablator, Tatiana, and no contract complete. What gives? What awfulness have the lawyers had in mind for... experiment, oh wait, I was supposed to transmit it? But there was no transmitter in the capsule! I swear the FAI is sabotaging my missions. Next time we shall have them, they will not be able to worm out with their contract language or anything. Until then, I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.